each hazard. I will briefly go through the hazard associated with COVID-19 using this model. We also use this model in the guidance documents we create for Ministry of Labour and for the Ontario government. First step, recognition. COVID-19, as we know, is a respiratory disease caused by a virus. We have been aware of this hazard for months now. COVID-19 is an infectious disease caused by a newly discovered coronavirus. COVID stands for coronavirus disease, and the 19 signifies for the year of 2019. In this year, the coronavirus causing the disease was discovered. To actively manage this hazard, we need to recognize how people can come into contact with COVID-19 during work and take steps to minimize those contacts. And also, if you need more information about this disease, you can always go to World Health Organization, Health Canada, and the Public Health Ontario for more information. Second step, assessment. After we have identified the potential hazard, we will need to consider and assess the risks. First, the risk of infection. Obviously, we have all been made aware that the risk of COVID-19 is high, meaning that this virus can spread easily and the consequences can be devastating, even including fatality. And also, as business owners or employers or supervisors, you also need to consider the risks to your credibility as a business owner or the risk to your financial viability when you consider to invest in those control measures. That is the assessment step. Control hierarchies. From this control hierarchy, you can see that different control measures from elimination to PPE. And the first priority is elimination. Based on the risk levels identified for your workplace, always consider a control program to protect your workers from COVID-19. And when introducing controls into the workplace, ensure that there are no additional hazards being created, or the controls related to other occupational hazards remain still effective. And first step or first priority is elimination. It means eliminating the needs for face-to-face contact. For example, now we have online meetings. Like what we are doing now, we have online webinars, we have online presentations, and also we have online ordering or online payment. We use all these control measures to avoid the unnecessary face-to-face meeting or contact. And for engineering, we can use physical barriers like sneeze guard or ticket box setting for cashiers. We can use these kind of physical barriers when face-to-face contact cannot be avoided. And also we can redesign workplace to allow for appropriate distancing. And also we can use like fans, or we can open the windows or doors to increase the fresh air in your workplace. And for administrative controls, you can do a lot of things. Like you can practice personal hygiene, or you can implement physical distancing of at least 2 meters, or you can have the health screening for your workers or for your customers. And you can even have surface discontamination, and you can put a signage on preventing actions. And but very important is that remember to communicate all those control measures with your workers and have training on them so they are aware of what they should do to protect themselves and their coworkers. And the last, PPE. As you can find in this hierarchy, PPE is the least effective control measure we can have, but it is the last line of defense we can use. For any workers assigned to use PPE, make sure that you train them on the selection, safe use, putting on, taking off, and the cleaning disposal. And you tell them the limitations of those PPEs. And you must also follow the manufacturer's guidelines and user manuals and provide storage locations for those reusable PPEs. We will be sharing best practice for controls with you, but it is important to remind you that you still need to follow up all the laws and the regulations set up by provincial and the federal government. I list some laws here, and the first you can see is the Occupational Health and Safety Act, and we have some other laws or regulations you need to follow when you create or update your health and safety policy, and to think about the control measures in your workplace. The last step is evaluation. That is the final step also. It is to evaluate the effectiveness of your controls and to make adjustment wherever it is necessary. And with information changing daily at times, new directions might require you to change some controls to better protect your workers and the guests. That is why we suggest you to check our Corona-19 homepage from time to time to find the most updated resources. Okay, I'm gonna give control to my colleague, Laurie.
Great,
Hi,
thank you,
Laurie.
Bill.
Yeah.
So I just want to share a few resources with you. So as we continue to navigate through this new normal, we have partnered with Lear to develop a playbook that outlines the processes that will help you raise awareness of the new health and well-being protocols. So while it's not a one-size-fits-all approach, this post-pandemic playbook includes practical guidelines from the Ministry of Labour, Training and Skills Development, Health Canada, Public Health, and it can be tailored to meet your needs. In this playbook, it includes the employer responsibilities. There's an emphasis on the hierarchy of controls that Bill already reviewed, health screening, different protocols, for example, isolation protocols, self-isolation and returning to work protocols, as well as the physical distancing protocols. There's information on pathogen decontamination measures, as well as training and communication. We call this an interactive playbook because there's links to up-to-date and current resources. And some of the materials that Bill's already talked about are referenced in here as well. So lots of links to WSPS resources, as well as Ministry of Labour Training, Skills and Development. The other resources, WSIB, Workplace Safety and Insurance Board, Government of Canada, Government of Ontario, Public Health Ontario, as well as the CDC, Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. So lots of fabulous stuff. And it's going to be, again, an interactive guideline that will be updated on a regular basis. Okay, next slide, please, Bill. Okay, we also have created a number of checklists. So these checklists are intended to be self-assessment tools that will assist you in ramping back up to regular business operations. These checklists include links to additional resources. So the first one is for businesses that continue to operate through the pandemic. The second one is for businesses returning after the shutdown of their operations. And the third one is for businesses who are returning after working remotely. So these checklists will help to support you as you prepare to reopen or restart your businesses. Okay, next slide, please, Bill. So these are some of the guidelines and guidance documents that Bill referred to. In the, along with our system partners, including the Ministry of Labour and Training, Skills and Development, as well as the other health and safety associations, we created about 90 of these sector-specific guidance documents. And Bill already showed you the one for the cashier. On the WSPS site, we have just around, I believe, 50 of these. And again, we're adding more as well. So these guidance documents will assist the employers as they, again, prepare to reopen. And while we're waiting to find out what the stage 2 businesses will be, it's a good idea to get these, start preparing now. So these documents will outline the safety measures that should be followed. And it's all about making sure that we protect our workplaces, our workers, our customers, and the general public. So these are quite detailed as well. So take some time to download these documents. Okay, next slide, please, Bill. Okay, so WSPS.ca is our website. And within our website, we have a small business center. So this is what our landing page looks like. Bill had already mentioned that our mandate of our department is to make sure that we provide resources for those really small businesses. So you'll see on the left, we have our safety roadmap. There's 3 of them, 1 to 5 employees, 6 to 19, and more than 20. There's also information on the business case for safety, and there's a link to the COVID-19 resources. Okay, next page, please, Bill. So this is what our safety roadmap will look like. So I just clicked on the one for 6 to 19. We encourage everybody to start with a safety checklist. It's a really simple tool to help you identify your gaps in your health and safety program. Once you identify your gaps, you can start working on an action plan. And these other resources and documents will help you. So there's a section on duties and responsibilities. So this looks at the internal responsibility system, how the employer, the supervisor, and the workers, we're all in this together and we all have a part to play. So this is what you will find there. Information on the health and safety policy for companies who have more than 5 workers. You're required to have a policy. If you don't have one, check out our sample. There's templates, and also the rationale behind the creation of the policy. There's information on posting requirements, violence and harassment. Again, for those companies who have 6 to 19 workers, you should have a health and safety representative. And this section will explain the role of the representative and also how they're involved with inspecting your workplace. So it's really important, especially during this time, to continue to inspect our workplaces. And there's all kinds of samples and information here. A section on hazards. Today we're focusing in on one of the hazards. The category of hazards would be biological hazards, but we still have to look at things like the psychosocial hazards, especially right now when it's a time of kind of heightened anxiety for all workers. So we have all kinds of information for psychosocial, safety hazards, physical hazards, chemical hazards, as well as musculoskeletal disorders. So knowing all of the hazards and how to, again, apply the RACE model like Bill talked about, recognition, assessment, control, and evaluation of our hazards. There is a section on training and orientation with lots of links and resources. We have a template for an employee health and safety handbook that can be downloaded and it's customizable. So click on that. There's also links to the mandatory free health and safety awareness training for both workers and supervisors. So there is a link to that as well. First aid is an area that we have to really think about right now because sometimes incidents can still happen, injuries can still happen. How are we going to be prepared, especially during COVID-19, to make sure that we are able to, again, protect the first aid responders as well as the person needing first aid. So we highly encourage you to check out this section, and if you need to reach out to your first aid responders as well. There's a section on, again, incident investigation and injury reporting, as well as return to work. So this is a really excellent resource for you. Okay, next slide, please. If you're feeling a little overwhelmed right now, because Bill and I have covered off a lot of information, we encourage you to participate in our small business advisory service. This is a service, again, that's available for small companies, and Bill already mentioned it, but reach out to us. You'll be assigned to a health and safety expert that will basically coach you and walk you through the process. So if you want more information about that, check out our website and reach out to either Bill or myself. Okay, last but not least, next slide, please. We have a duty consultant that's available. We have extended our hours, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. on Monday to Friday. We have a toll-free number as well as an email. And we also encourage you to check out all of the information, as Bill mentioned, on our WSPS.ca website. Type in COVID, type in, there's all kinds of guidance documents. There's all kinds of sections on frequently asked questions. We have an e-newsletter that we encourage you to sign up for. The last one just came out last week, and there was all kinds of information on masks and face coverings and how to get PPE, and even if you need the PPE. So lots of information, so we encourage you to reach out. Okay, and that's it. So we're open to questions now. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Laurie.
So everyone, if you have any questions for Bill and Laurie, now's the time. I've received questions from business owners in the past. I can only advise to the best of my ability, but these are the experts. So I'm going to open it up. Nothing? Wow. You guys did a fantastic job. Bill and Laurie, you guys, this is slam dunk. Can we just talk? So one of the questions that I've received in the past, and maybe you can help me with this, is the difference between N95 masks and K95 masks. And obviously, there's getting a hold of N95 masks is a challenge for some employers, but K95 are readily available. There's concern that obviously based on what we've heard in the media, that they're not up to par. Any advice you can offer there? Any suggestions?
This is a question that we get quite regularly, and our latest e-newsletter, there was an article on it. Basically, the title was "Can't Get the N95s. What do you do?" This is if you, again, do your risk assessment to determine even if there's a need. So it's important to start by understanding what the N95 actually means. So the N means it's not oil proof. The 95 refers to the respirator's percent efficiency in filtering particulates at 3 microns in diameter. So if the N95 respirators are not available, you could look into an R, which means it's oil resistant, or a P, which is oil proof. So these would still provide protection. If the N, P, or R all filter out particulates at 3 microns, and depending on the device, they can be either 95%, 99%, or even 100% efficient. These are considered to be disposable respirators. They're not designed to be washed or wetted. Basically, these are what we call FFRs. So these are basically, they're not approved for routine decontamination as a conventional standard of care. So basically, what you could do is you could look into alternative devices as well. So these would be things such as a half-face respirator, power air purifying respirators. They offer greater protection, and you can have 1 or 2 HEPA filter cartridges that can be replaced depending on the style. And unlike the disposable respirators, these can be cleaned and reused, but it's always really important to follow the manufacturer's instructions. Bill already mentioned it, that PPE is only effective if it's worn properly, if you include training, fit testing as well, the use, the care, the limitations, et cetera, et cetera. And if you are looking for more information on where to get PPE, you can contact ontario.ca/PPE. And we also have an FAQ on PPE considerations that you can download as well. So lots of great information on getting this. And I did mention an acronym. I apologize for not spelling it out, but an FFR is called a filtering face piece respirator. So that's the class of respirator that the N95s are. So you have to determine if it's actually necessary, and then if it is, you can check out ontario.ca PPE.
I hope you can see the website I'm sharing now. In our homepage, we have an article called "Cannot Get an N95 Masks. Your workplace requires. Here is what to do." It is an article.
Yeah.
I think. Sorry, go ahead.
Bill, we're seeing your PowerPoint slide, not the article.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Let me see.
I added stuff to it.
Perfect. Thank you, my love. Did you toast it?
I'm gonna use frozen bread now. Don't open it though; it's gonna go all over the place.
Let me share again. Okay, sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, this one.
So for you, oh, that's so good.
And
Yeah.
I will post the link.
Is it in here? I
Okay, fantastic. Sorry, can I think it might be easier, and I think we're gonna do this afterwards. But
Yeah, yeah.
if you could circulate, if you could send us both the PowerPoint and the links, we can circulate this in the follow-up email. I've had a couple of members ask for that information.
Okay.
So I sorry, could you just cancel the screen sharing? I think.
And add this, I've had a few questions recently that if you're okay with me just
Yep.
sharing them. One was regarding cash. So lots of people are asking, do they have to accept cash? And the basic answer is it's up to the individual business to determine what they would like to accept, right?
Yep.
So according to the Bank of Canada, it's up to the seller. There's no laws that require you to accept cash. I know there's a lot of companies who are just accepting debit or credit with tap. The main thing is to be clear about what you're going to do. So you can indicate on your website, you can indicate with signage. I was at a local store the other day. They had a big sign outside their business. And they also had a staff member positioned there, chatting with us, screening us, those kinds of things. Right now, we don't know exactly how long the virus can survive on surfaces. There's all kinds of preliminary information that says it can range from a few hours up to several days. So the main thing is if you decide to accept cash, because sometimes your customers, there may be limitations on what kinds of payment options they have available. So if you decide to accept cash, making sure that you equip your cashiers with hand sanitizer. So you want to make sure that we have access to at least a minimum of 60% alcohol in our hand sanitizers. So again, it's totally up to the business what they decide they want to do. So that's one I've had quite frequently.
I think that's great, Lorraine. I've had those questions as well. I actually segues really well into Susan's question. Susan, did you want to ask the question yourself? I know I can see it at Gmail account. I'm not sure if you're able to ask. Let me just unmute. Oh, okay. So I'm just going to ask Susan. She sent it to me. So she's asking, I'm wondering about the 6 feet rule. I have read scientific articles stating that there have been documented cases of transmission up to more than twice that distance. Similarly, the self-isolation period of 14 days seems arbitrary since there have been cases that incubated up to 27 days. Any information?
My recommendation is to just check out again Health Canada, Public Health, Centers for Disease Control. They seem to be very up to date as far as research. Yes, there's a lot of information out there, but all we can do right now is follow the guidelines that have been created by the Ministry of Health, by Public Health, by the World Health Organization. But again, Centers for Disease Control, CDC, is also a very good source for the latest research and information.
Okay. Gerry has a question. Gerry, did you want to ask a question or did you want me to ask that question? Can I unmute you? Yeah.
I'm sort of, I'm trying to find my question.
Yeah.
Oh, about the silicone face masks. There's, I've been trying to look for information on silicone face masks, half masks or full face masks, because they incorporate eye protection as well. But there's very little information relating to the filtration systems. Now, I'm assuming that the N95s or the P95s and the P100s, which are usually the cartridges that come with these masks, are sufficient or do work as well as the P95s as the disposable masks as well.
Yes, and as I mentioned, the N, P, and R respirators, they all filter out particulates up to 3 microns. So They can be 95 to 99 to even 100% efficient. And again, the ones that you talked about, the full, the half-face respirators or the power air purifying respirators with the cartridges, those can be even more efficient. So if you are looking for specific information, again, you can reach out to our duty consultant to have a discussion. You can check out our PPE FAQ and check out the ontario.ca PPE website as well. But if you want to have a conversation kind of one-on-one, we do have, again, experts. Our duty consultants can kind of talk to you about the specifics of a certain respirator. I hope that helps.
It does. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Gerry. Nina, I noticed you have a question as well. Did you want to ask directly, or did you want? I don't know if she.
Oh, hi. Yes, this is Nina, and my question is, with it being so warm out there now, I personally find myself, when I'm wearing a mask, it's difficult. It's difficult to breathe normally. Plus, with the added heat, I find it more difficult. So, what do you recommend in terms of that, and how to sort of maintain compliance?
That's where it comes down to, like what Bill said, you have to determine if face coverings, that's if we're expecting our workers to wear them or our customers to wear them. So when we're deciding it, we have to, again, look at the limitations. And there are some people who can't wear masks. We know that masks can introduce other hazards. So if it affects somebody's ability to breathe, if it causes, dermatitis or any skin irritations, so we have to determine. So we understand that the primary method for preventing the transmission of COVID-19 are, again, self-isolation, physical distancing, and hand washing. Choosing to wear a face covering can be an effective effort to protect others. So my face covering will protect yours. So when we decide if we're going to decide whether our workers are using these face coverings, we have to, again, think about all those limitations. So if you want to, again, look into some of the research from CDC, Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, again, give us a call, because whether some people may not need to wear these in their workplace. So like Bill had mentioned, what we want to do is rely on PPE as our last line of defense. So what can we implement from our, again, elimination, our engineering controls, or administrative controls that would be more effective? The problem with face coverings too, if they don't fit properly, if they're not the right kind of face covering, they can cause other hazards. And also, what if we're touching them, we're touching our face? So it can also sometimes provide a false sense of security. So again, understanding those limitations. But you're right, they can be very, very uncomfortable. I have an N95 respirator that from before the breakout. I also have a half-face reusable respirator, and I've worn them, and wow, you're right. Like after a while, it can be very uncomfortable, very hot. So what can we do other than just relying on the face covering? So that's where you may want to look into some of the research, look into some other controls that you can implement, and also speak to our duty consultants for more advice. So hopefully that answers your question.
I think it did. Thanks, Lori. Michael, I noticed you have a question as well. Did you want to ask the question directly?
Sure. Thanks, Abdus, for the opportunity to join this. I love this format with this meeting rooms. It's just absolutely brilliant. So, anyways, I've become a huge fan. I didn't know how we could do this before, but this is great. So my question's around. So basically, businesses, and especially in the small business sector, right? We are expected to invest, and we do that willingly, into developing and putting in place the safety measures, whether it's PPE, whether it's separators, whether it's social distancing in a type of restaurant type of business, and so on and so on. controlling the number of people that come in at a time in the store? How do you handle, for example, payments? There was a mention about the cash payments there, but also how do you handle entering your code on one of those point of sale machines? So there's investments that's ongoing from our side, that so we can stay in compliance with these regulations. My question is, if we plan ahead to 2021, can the panel give us any kind of view of, are these new safety measures are becoming basically as they are part of the new norm right now, will they become permanent in our future? So in other words, there's always going to be, a plexiglass separator when I go to Costco, the cashier, and all kinds of things with cashier have to be protect themselves from people. I mean, it's almost like we're going to be walking around in little bubbles. We won't be able to really touch each other and really, connect in a more meaningful way. Or do you anticipate once a vaccine becomes available to actually go more to a normal engagement and with business, with each other, and in stores or whatnot?
Basically, at this time, it's hard to know what the new normal is going to look like, but I want to draw your attention to the Little Green Book, the Occupational Health and Safety Act. The legislation is pretty broad. So under this legislation, it's basically under the employer responsibilities, section 25(2)H. It talks about basically the employer must do everything, take every precaution reasonable under the circumstances to protect the health and safety of their workers. And then the supervisors also have a legal responsibility. So what does this mean? And that's where, again, the employer is expected to do their risk assessment, understanding what the risks are, and probable potential risks, as well. So we don't know as far as how this virus is going to respond. So in the meantime, what can we do? So the legislation is very vague. It's just that the employer must do everything reasonable. So what is reasonable? And that's where those guidance documents can help point you in the right direction. We don't have, again, a one-size-fits-all solution. All we can do is say we have some basic ideas of how this virus is transmitted, and we have some best practices for suggested controls that we believe will help mitigate your risk. And we don't know what the end of 2020 or 2021 is going to look like. All we can do is encourage you to stay up to date with the most current, and there's so much out there on the internet. We know that there's so much. So some of the resources that Bill already mentioned, like Ontario.ca, the World Health Organization, the Ministry of Labor Training, Skills and Development, WSPS, all on our micro site for COVID-19, there are links to all of the leaders. So we're all in this together. It's something with this global pandemic. So we know we've got the brightest minds in the world. Everybody's working together. So those resources can all be linked right from our WSPS.ca website. Stay informed and do the best. And that's what the legislation is all about, is doing everything that's reasonable. And what reasonable means to you is different to maybe your neighbor. So hopefully that will help.
And there are some external resources you can rely on, just like we mentioned just now in the free consulting program. So they are supposed to visit your workplace and give you some ideas, but now maybe it's not applicable during the pandemic. And also WSIB, they have a incentive program called Excellence Program, Health and Safety Excellence Program. So join this program, you can get some rebate back from WSIB. Thank you.
Sorry, I just noticed I was muted. I do have a question from Lori, and then Gerry, I know you have another question as well. So Lori, did you want to ask your question, or?
Sure. Bill did give me a private answer, but just so everybody knows, my question first was asking for someone I know, whether the small business consulting also applied to sole proprietors with 0 employees. And he did say yes, that it did. So that was very helpful. And I was also going to ask about the WSIB program, because I know we were looking into that prior to the pandemic, and then it just sort of got put on the back burner. So it's good to know that we can still possibly go ahead with that.
Okay, fantastic. Gerry, over to you.
Just wanted to ask, do you have any suggestions on how to deal with people who use their PPE as a fashion statement and not the way it's really intended to be used? Because oftentimes I see people with their masks down around their chin, or their nose isn't covered, or a lot of times don't see any at all. And that's in places like grocery stores and such. And my understanding is that wearing a mask is for the protection of the other person. So, if the customers are wearing masks, doesn't that apply to the employees as well?
Well, that's where, again, this answer, there's two parts to it. So first of all, if you're a business owner, an employer, if it's your staff that is not wearing the PPE properly, then you would have a duty to, again, you need to coach them. You need to correct them. You would need to have, again, a policy and procedure in place to deal with PPE. And Bill already mentioned it involves, again, the proper putting it on, taking it off. If they're not using it properly, you would have to have a discussion with them. And everybody should have a progressive discipline policy where, let's have a chat. So if I'm not wearing my mask properly, if you've decided, Gerry, as the employer, you expect them to wear a certain kind of face covering, and then you would determine which kind, and you would supply it, you would train them, all of those kinds of things, right? So the other thing that you would want to do is, if they're not wearing it properly, you're going to have a discussion. Then it could be some coaching. You might understand that there's some issues around it, and then you would look into possibly a written warning and suspension or termination. So if you decide what your rules are, once you determine that this is a requirement to work in our workplace, and then if your people aren't following the rules, then you need to do something about it. And that would be the supervisor's role. Now, if it's your customer, again, if you have policies for your customers and a code of conduct for your customers, there are some workplaces that have decided that this is what they're going to do. Is again, an employer can decide. It's your business, so you can decide that this is a requirement. It's similar to the, think before the pandemic, no shirts, no shoes, no service, right? So if you decide that if somebody needs to wear a face covering coming into your workplace, you would have signage. Some people are posting it on their social media. Some will have signs. Again, I was at my local hardware store on the weekend, and there was a huge sign outside the business, as well as an employee stationed there to watch us. They're monitoring us probably for signs and symptoms. And also, if we weren't wearing our face covering, they could then deny entrance. So there's different ways to handle it. Once somebody comes into your workplace and they take off their mask or face covering, if you have people, again, monitoring that and you need to decide ahead of time how you're going to deal with non-compliance of the rules, right? Things could escalate, so you have to make sure that you're trained in de-escalation techniques. As I mentioned, right now, people are really stressed out right now, right? We're stressed out, and people may not always respond in the way that we expect them to respond. So we have to, be gentle with people, but we also may have to have, okay, if somebody becomes aggressive or starts harassing our staff or becomes violent, then what are we going to do? And these are things that you can think about ahead of time, because it might even involve calling the police for support. So think about this ahead of time. How are we going to handle it? So I know it's a kind of a complex situation, but there's two parts to it: what we're going to do with our staff, and again, the people who come into our workplaces, our customers, our guests, and those kinds of things. Okay, so hopefully that helps.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I think it does. Are there any other questions? I think now's the best time to just turn off your mute and just ask the question. Heather, did you want to ask the question directly, or did you want me to ask it? Oh, okay. I think it's a comment.
I was just making a statement, just in order to let everybody else know. So many people think gloves are safe for them to use and keep them safe, but they can just be a spread, a vector spread. So just wanted to point that out.
Yeah, and if I can add to that, Heather, we've had lots of questions about gloves. So when we talk about gloves too, we have to remember that we're talking about the impervious gloves. So think nitrile gloves, those kinds of things. Because sometimes people say, oh, I'm putting gloves on, but they've got gardening gloves on or cloth gloves. So generally gloves are more appropriate for chemical exposure. They're not considered a primary control to prevent the exposure to COVID-19. Our skin is a really good barrier. And basically, gloves, when it comes to biological agents, it sometimes can put workers at higher risk if they're not taken off properly, and they can provide a false sense of security. When we're wearing gloves, we may be less likely to wash and sanitize our hands. They may be counterproductive and put others at risk of infection. We need to understand the limitations. We need to be trained. We need to be reinforced that, yes, you still have to wash your hands before you put them on, after you take them off. Again, making sure that we're not introducing other hazards like Bill mentioned, because gloves can have entanglement issues. We can get caught in machine and equipment. They can also cause other kinds of problems like dermatitis and those kinds of things. They have to fit properly. And safety data sheets, when you think back to, again, your WMIS program, the safety data sheets can help you to evaluate whether there's a need for gloves. And we also have to dispose of them properly. I think all of us have seen, gloves littering our streets, our businesses. So making sure that we dispose of them properly in the appropriate garbage cans, all that kind of stuff. So yes, gloves certainly, again, provide a false sense of security. So yeah, it's important to, again, check out our FAQ on PPE considerations. There's lots of information on gloves there as well.
Thanks.
Perfect. Thank you. I think we're coming to a close. Bill, Lori, if there are any other remarks, anything else that you want to tell our members?
I would just say stay up to date. Things are changing every single day. I've been getting lots of questions about when stage 2 of the reopening is going to take place. We don't have that information yet. I understand that there could be some information coming next week. We don't know exactly what that's going to look like. It's basically with the stages, remembering that we're all in this together, and it's about keeping the workplaces, the staff, the customers, the guests, keeping everybody safe. And again, we will continue to post more of these guidance documents to help. As you're waiting to reopen, if you're not one of the businesses that has reopened yet, use these guidance documents as a guideline, as a resource to help you put your controls in place. And that can help you to at least be prepared so you can be proactive when it's time to reopen.
Yeah, and I want to mention again that there are a whole bunch of free resources like in the government website, Health and Safety Associations, our organizations, and WSIB, and feel free to use them.
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you both. Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Lori, so much for taking the time to speak with businesses. I know some of the questions that were asked and some of the topics that you covered were ones that we're inundated with on a daily. I mean, we're not experts. We can only advise to the best of our ability. So it's great that we were able to bring everyone together to actually connect them with the experts. And hopefully we can do this again. If you do have any additional questions for Bill and Lori, please feel free to send them to me. My email is abdus@newmarkchamber.ca, or if you can send to the info@newmarkchamber.ca account, and we'll get it to them. They've been terrific at responding, and we can get you a response really quickly. Bill, if you could, I know you're going to be sending Tyler some of those resources that you mentioned. So everyone, you will see everything that was covered today in the follow-up email. So thank you. Enjoy the rest of your Friday. Have a great weekend, and hopefully we will see you all soon. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Have a nice weekend.